But we're very happy to have Willy Fautré of Human Rights Without Frontiers, who made a report regarding the case recently this spring.
Okay. So the previous speakers this side event have focused a lot on harassment, demonization of religious minorities by non-state actors, also social panic created and amplified by the media, as well as social hostility and intolerance against all groups. All this leading to various forms of discrimination towards individuals belonging to these groups. It is in this perspective that I will share with you my experience and my report about the MISA school in Romania. A very complex issue because there are three main components. First, you have a network of yoga schools named MISA. Then you have the spiritual leader, Gregorian Bivolaru, and afterwards you have the normal, ordinary yoga practitioners that were influenced by the media coverage of this issue that you already partly saw now on the screen. First, what is MISA? MISA, first, is the acronym of Movement for Spiritual Integration in the Absolute. It's a non-profit organization that was registered in 1990. It is a loose network of training centers, yoga schools, ashrams. There have been some sociological surveys about this group, just a very small number of statistics. The average age of the members in 2005, when that survey was made, was between 30 and 40 years old. 64% of the members had a university degree, and more than 80% of the people had a job, either in the private sector or in the public sector. So while quite well integrated into a society, I would say. Now, Gregorian Bivolaru, started teaching yoga in the 1970s already, so at the time of communism in Romania. And of course, he started getting into trouble with the regime, and especially under Ceausescu. He was arrested several times, jailed, sentenced to prison terms, sometimes amnestied, and also sent to a psychiatric hospital at some time where Ceausescu was putting the dissidents. But some time after that, Ceausescu was overthrown, and so the country got rid of the communist regime. Unfortunately, the campaigns against the yoga centers was not finishing with the end of communism in Romania, because the people in the police were the same, the people in the judiciary had not changed, and they still had that culture that yoga was, a suspicious movement from outside, and that it should be repressed. So for about 10 years, from the mid-90s until 2004, there were regular campaigns against yoga in general and MISA schools in particular. In the meantime, there was also a revision of the trials that had taken place against Gregorian Bivolaru, and in 2011, a court ruled that all the charges should be dropped because those trials had been politically motivated. Then in 2004 happened what you saw now on the screen. So massive police intervention, 300 masked policemen from the anti-terrorist forces crashed into 16 private houses, and also ashrams, the library of MISA in Bucharest as well. You saw that the pictures were taken, that the whole operation was filmed, and what is bizarre is that those films were already on the Romanian television on the same evening. And you saw the humiliating positions or situations in which some of the girls were at the time of the shooting. Just a small detail, that operation had been called Christ. So I think that it was one way of showing that Christianity, and in particular the Orthodox religion, was the main religion and the only one that could be accepted, and that any competing, I would say, belief system was not welcome in Romania. So the campaign culminated with the events that you have just seen. One of the charges that were brought against Gregorian Bivolaru was sexual relations with a minor. Another one was trafficking in human beings, and another one sexual perversion. That was, of course, mentioned in all the media at the time and during the proceedings in the next 10 years. One of the minors was interrogated by the police on the day of the intervention from morning until evening without a lawyer, outside the presence of her parents. She was 17 and a half at that time. She was living with her fiancé in Bucharest. When she went back home in the evening, she told her boyfriend, let's say, and he immediately reacted and said, okay, we will go and see your lawyer, and tomorrow you will say that it was under constraint, that you made that statement, that you agreed that on paper that Gregorian Bivolaru had had sexual relations with you. So on the next morning she went to court, to the police station with a lawyer, and she withdrew her statement that had been obtained under constraint and in unusual and illegal circumstances the day before. But the police and the judiciary afterwards didn't take that retraction into consideration. And the case went on. And the case went on for years, as I said, covered by the media. And that poor girl that you saw, Madalina, was called in the media the prostitute of the yoga school. She was called the private whore of the guru, and so on and so on. So you imagine the psychological damage that caused in her life and in the life of her family. So when I was in Bucharest in May of this year, the situation of Gregorian Bivolaru was as follows. He had been cleared in 2010 and 2011 from any charge by the courts, first the court in Sibiu, and the second one on appeal in Alba Iulia. But the prosecutor's office had lodged a complaint and got on cassation. And so I was present at that session, the Court of Cassation. It was about half an hour, not more than that. And 1 month after I left Bucharest came the final decision that Bivolaru was sentenced to 5 years, 6 years in prison and 5 years of deprivation of his civil rights. As it was said before, already in 2004, Bivolaru had gone to Sweden and asked for political asylum. He had been granted political asylum after a long review of his case by the Supreme Court of Sweden. So that was really a serious investigation that had been carried out in Stockholm. They had even invited Madalina, the so-called victim of sexual relations when she was a minor. So they heard her in Stockholm, and so they decided that, they ruled that Bivolaru would not have a fair trial in Romania, and they granted him political asylum. So that's his situation now, is in Sweden. There is a sentence, a prison sentence against him. What's the evidence? Really, I have a lot of question marks on my mind because there is only one sort of evidence which is testimony, obtained under constraint, withdrawn on the next day. I know that the case now is being processed to the European Court in Strasbourg, so we will see at the next stage what will happen with that sentence. But he may be deported at any time from Sweden to Romania to start serving his sentence. One other point that I wanted to stress as well is that it's the media. You mentioned before that there had been a thorough investigation by the Association of Human Rights, the former Romanian Helsinki Committee in Bucharest about that case, and they registered all the media coverage, news and films that were shown on television, and also debates on radio, etc. And they came out to this assessment. From March 2004 to October 2005, there were 570 pieces of news hostile to Misa Gregorian Bivolaru that were both broadcast or printed in one way or another. Of course, all this had an impact on the lives of the yoga practitioners, on their family life as well. So we met quite a number of those people, because numerous people were victims of harassment by the media, by the judiciary, as well as of discrimination. Artists, we met artists who had lost their jobs, teachers, engineers, medical doctors, professors, and so on, that were affected by this distorted media coverage. Some lost their jobs, so it was the case, for example, of a judge that I met, of a military, a policeman, a journalist, medical doctor, and in a very exceptional case, the girl who was an adult, she was in her 20s, was kidnapped by her family, confined to a psychiatric hospital with the complicity of the medical staff, forcibly submitted to inhuman medical treatment during 2 months, and then sent back to her family, where she was confined during 9 months, just to convince her to give up her yoga practices. So as a conclusion, I would say that that whole dramatic story had a huge negative impact on quite a number of people. There are now 40,000 yoga practitioners in the Misa schools in Romania. They hide their affiliation to yoga courses. Sometimes they are detected as yoga practitioners because they are lacto-vegetarians. And then when people say that, oh, you don't eat any meat, oh, that is because you're a yoga practitioner. Oh, you have that guru that abused the underage girls, and so on and so on. So they hide that, but sometimes they are detected. So the human cost has been absolutely huge and incommensurate. And it's not finished, because there is now a bad name on the Misa schools in general, and on any yoga practitioner in particular. Thank you for your attention.
How can figures maintain their consultative status at the United Nations as in the Economic Social Council? How can they maintain this status?
Yeah, I certainly don't have the answer to this question, except that the affiliation to ECOSOC is reviewed every 4th year.
Yeah.
So you should see when they were first registered with its status, and then inform the proper mechanisms of the UN of some sectarian deviances of those groups. Just 2 points that I want to raise. First, that the privileged status of FICRIS should be removed, and we should unite our efforts so that it happens in due time at the UN and at the Council of Europe. Also to ask to put an end to the financing of such a movement with public money. Second point, we heard a number of statements here at the OSCE today that were anti-Islam, as you said, in one way or another. in the previous years, we also heard statements from FECRIS representatives against sects in France and in other countries. I think here again we should unite our efforts and ask the OSCE to forbid any form of criticism against any other religious movement. We are here to monitor the implementation of the standards of the OSCE by the governments, and that's how it should stay, by the governments. Thank you.